right, Spear and Clover podcast. I'm your host, Jason Skisick. I'm here today with Joe Mackey. Joe Mackey is one of the owners of MKD Wealth Coaches. Is that right?
Yes.
Joe, thank you so much for taking the time out today. I really appreciate you coming on the show. I also think that you're going to bring a ton of useful information for the folks that will be listening to this show, which is obviously entrepreneurs. Can you do me a favor? I'm always terrible at this. I tried it in the past and I always botch it. So can you do me a favor and just kind of tell the folks that are listening and watching what it is that you guys do and where you guys are coming from?
Sure. Great. Yeah. Hey, thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it. And great to be here. Happy New Year to everyone.
Yeah.
Awesome to be starting a new year and kicking off all of our new goals and plans and all that exciting stuff. So great to be here with you. So we are a wealth coaching firm. So in the wealth management industry, specifically designed to help successful entrepreneurs who have hit the ceiling of complexity with their wealth have aha moments so they can gain clarity around the best decisions for them to make with their wealth, so they can make those decisions in a place of confidence and they can move forward and have freedom. And when I say freedom, what I specifically mean is most successful entrepreneurs that have built a high net worth have a lot of thinking, worrying, and wondering about their wealth and what they're going to do with it, how it's going to impact the world around them. We want to reach inside of their heads, grab that thinking, worrying, and wondering, take it away from them so they have freedom to give themselves more fully to the things that they enjoy the most and that they're really, really good at, whether it's being a spouse, a parent, person in the community, a philanthropist, whatever recreational stuff they enjoy, whatever we can free them up to give themselves more fully to that they like and are good at is what we believe our highest calling is.
Wow, that's really exciting. So first of all, it's great to work with people who've won, right? I think that's such an interesting niche that you guys have carved out for yourselves. I did spend a little time as an intern with an ultra high net worth private wealth management group when I was coming out of college and just really enjoyed dealing with the people there, really enjoyed dealing with the clients that we were serving. I hope to have, shout out to Frank McCannon and Mike Bailey. Hope to have them on someday. But that's really exciting. So tell me about the rest of your team. So what is it that you specialize in? I know that you guys have a complementary team. And one of the things, just looking over the website, this is the second time that you and I have spoken, but just looking over the website, one of the things that really struck me was, the folks that you're dealing with have won, right? So they've had great consultative advice over the years. They know a lot about their industry, about how to, win the game, right? Make wealth, build the business. What you guys talk about doing is consolidating that consultation into one group. And so what is it that you do on the team? And then what are the other members of your team doing?
Yeah. So at the highest level, now I'll bring it down. What we're helping successful people do that have won a lot in their life is now they're at a point where we're helping them win the game that matters. Mm-hmm. Right. And so what is the game that matters to them is how is their wealth going to impact the world around them? Specifically, how's their wealth going to impact their family, any philanthropy that they're passionate about, and or their community. And so when they start to realize that they're going to leave a legacy, most people are going to do that by default. And we want to work with the people who have a desire to do that by design. So that's where we come in and help them win the game that matters. Mm-hmm. Think about our team. We've got 12 people on our team today. Just did our annual planning, set up for hiring a couple more people this year. But if you look at our team, there's 3 partners. I would be considered the visionary. If anybody else in this world is familiar with the Entrepreneurial Operating System, EOS, we're very, very big fans of that. We started working with Gino Wickman, the founder of EOS, 12 years ago. And we implemented it, and we are tried and true EOS all the way. So I play the role of visionary. My partner, Nathan Bohannon, is our integrator. And we have another partner, John Dankovich, who is later in his career, but still a partner in the firm. And then we've got an additional 9 people that play varying roles of support or expertise. But I play that role of visionary for MKD. And then also in our client relationships, I am the primary person helping them clarify their vision and their values and their goals.
I bet you that's a lot of fun.
It really is.
And shout out to Traction. Traction totally changed EOS, Entrepreneur's Operating System, and the book is Traction. I've recommended that to my clients hundreds of times. I think that's one of the first things that I'll recommend to somebody when it seems like they're, having some tough time seeing the forest through the trees, or their structure of the way that they operate the business has been a struggle for them. I think that method and that model is really excellent. So couldn't agree more on that. So talk to me about where you're coming from personally. So what were you doing prior to doing this? And sort of tell us I always do like an entrepreneurial origin story. So what's your origin story? Where are you coming from? I love the visionary thing, by the way. I love that.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. So kind of crazy. I grew up in a small town in Indiana, just east of Indianapolis called Greenfield.
Sure.
Had no idea I was an entrepreneur. I started to have some experience around that when I was hired at Late Night Pizza by a guy named Sonny Brinkman to be a pizza delivery driver, and worked there for, 6 months or something, and started working inside and eventually became a manager while I was in high school and started giving ideas to Sonny. I started kind of saying, hey, why do you do this way and do that way? And I started improving the operations, and he started paying me bonuses for that because sales started going up because the pizzas tasted better and, other things that we were kind of working on together. I knew that I wanted to grow in business and do something. I didn't know what. I thought maybe I wanted to be a politician. I was going down that road for a while. So I went to college at Indiana University, got a 4-year degree in the School of Public and Environmental Affairs. I thought I was going to be a politician, started to realize and unpack some of the things there that weren't as exciting to me as I thought they would be, and decided not to do that. When I graduated, I didn't know what I wanted to do. So I got a job in sales in the food service distribution business. Most people are familiar with Cisco Food Service. They're the biggest. Worked in that industry for 10 years. Just sales initially, growed into management, district manager, and whatever else, special projects and different things I did. And kind of an epiphany experience 20 years ago. So I've been doing this for 20 years.
Wow.
I was at the office on a Friday afternoon and was successful and things were going well, and just said, this is exactly what I don't want to do with the rest of my life. I don't want to be executive Joe, senior VP or CEO or whatever. It looked awful and miserable to me. I looked at the people that were the most successful in the organization, and they were the most owned by the company. And they were later in their career, and they were working the hardest they'd ever worked. And I just said, man, I want to work the hardest I've ever worked now. When I get later in my career, I want to have a lot more freedom. So I went home from work that day to my wife, who was pregnant with our second child. She had quit work, so she was a stay-at-home mom, and said, hey, I don't want to do this. I want to do something different. She said, what? I said, I don't know. Kept working, but went on a soul-searching mission. And through investigation and talking with a lot of people, figured out that the financial services industry was where I wanted to go and do it in an entrepreneurial way. And so 20 years ago, I came into this world with an RIA firm and started hacking it out, and was absolutely clueless about how hard it would be to build a business from scratch, coming from a food service background. So Jason, had you and I been friends 20 years ago, I would have called you up and said, hey, can I buy you a cup of coffee and tell you about what I'm doing now? And said financial services. And you're like, Mackey, you're the green beans and French fries guy. I'm like, no, don't worry about that. Don't worry about that. So if you'd meet me on Sunday morning at 6 a.m., man, I was your guy. And I worked like a maniac for the first 2 years. I worked 7 days a week, 15 hours a day at least. And then beyond that, I still worked probably 100 hours a week for a long time, digging the business out of the ground, doing business with anybody. And then slowly over time started to realize that when I did do business with an entrepreneur, sparks flew. And there was something really unique about the experience for me and working with them. And then it was also unique. And I think the value they got out, because I thought like an entrepreneur. And so, man, maybe 10 years ago, we started saying, hey, we want to do more work with entrepreneurs. And then we just got more and more narrow. And now we're down to, we're real super specific about our niche and exactly who we help and how we help them. And that's where it's gotten really, really exciting, as we're very, very clear on who that is and what we do. And now, man, when we run into those people, sparks fly. So that entrepreneurial journey has been a real interesting experience for me, and especially in the early days. After my wife and I had our second child, we went on to have 4 more children.
Get out of here.
Yeah. So we have 6 total.
Wow.
Between the ages of 11 and 21. So it's never a dull moment. Have 3 in college now, and just it's a ton of fun and excitement, and building a business at the early stages of being married and having kids was a very interesting experience too.
Wow. There's so much to cover there. I mean, first of all, congratulations on building a big and what sounds like beautiful family. That's obviously A1. Two, man, you talk about your epiphany moment, and it gives me flashbacks, man. I remember I was in commercial banking, and I remember sitting at the table. I remember the meeting. I remember sitting at the table, and it was me, it was my boss's boss, and my boss's boss's boss, and an entrepreneur, the client, right? And I remember two things in that same meeting. Number one was, and this happened all the time, my opinion, my perspective was only shared with one guy, and that was the entrepreneur at the other side of the table. And then two, and I'm sorry if I've told this story before, and then two is I looked at that highest stakeholder, the boss's 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 boss, or whatever that was. I know his name, I won't say it. And I was like, this guy gets up at 5, drives an hour and something into the city. This was in Chicago. He's here before me. He leaves after me. I don't care what he's making. I don't want his life. And that for me was an epiphany moment as well. So I definitely can identify with that. And I'm sure many of our viewers and listeners will as well. I want to hit on something you mentioned. You talked about building a book of business. This was 20 years ago. Building a book of business, I don't think that's changed much. So maybe if you could give us a little more insight, like what were you doing? Because I know a ton of people in, whether it's insurance or, financial services, entrepreneurial services, but also fitness or nail salons or anybody, right? What were you doing kind of starting with a blank book and trying to build that? What were some things that you did?
Yeah. The big thing for me was all about activity and just sharing with people what I was doing. So I was really tapping into my network of people, just everybody I knew, friends, family, people I had worked with in the past, and just saying, hey, Jason, can we get together and, buy you a cup of coffee and share with you the type of work that I'm doing to see if I can be a resource for you or anybody you know. And I always took, I was sharing it with you. I wasn't asking you to do business with me. I don't want to. Back then, I'm sure I was way more salesy, because I needed it badly. Where now I'm so careful about sharing with people what we do, but never, putting anybody in an uncomfortable situation. But yeah, so back then it was really anybody, anytime, anywhere. It didn't matter. And now over 20 years, it's gone from if you could fog a mirror, I'd do business with you, to there's maybe 3,000 people in the Detroit metro area that fit our target market. And we only want to do business with 100 of them,
Sure.
And so we're just, again, so super specific about who we help and how we help them.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Do you guys only work with people in the Detroit area?
Not only, it's where we focus our marketing efforts because it's where we are, but we definitely have clients outside of this area that have come through connections in this area.
Sure. One thing I was going to mention was you talked about the methods that you were using back then and how you might have been more salesy, more. There's that thing that need people can smell, right? It's so funny because I've coached sales quite a bit and I've done it a lot myself, and I don't really like it. I don't like doing what you would call like capital S sales very much. But I am an evangelist for the things that I care about and that I believe in, that I'm convicted in. And it's so funny, your mature self at this point that we're talking now, looking back at yourself younger, going like, man, if you just would have relaxed, because now you probably have a much better hit rate. You probably are not nearly as stressed out about it. You have absolute conviction. There's just no question that you are good at what you do, I'm assuming, right?
Yeah.
And so that process just becomes so much easier. Is there anything that you think somebody listening to this, because ultimately this podcast is going to be viewed by a ton of different people in a lot of different stages of their entrepreneurial journey, but all of them are going to have to sell themselves, their service, their business, whatever it may be. Is there any advice that you can think of that might expedite that process to go from that young, ambitious person that maybe smells of need to somebody that maybe has a little more conviction and more comfortable in the pocket there?
Yeah, for sure. You talked about a little bit when you said the word evangelist, because that to me reeks of somebody who sincerely, deeply believes in what they're sharing. And so there's a big difference probably between selling and sharing. If I'm that fully sold out for, convicted about, bought into whatever phraseology you want to use, what it is that I'm sharing with you, then that's going to be infectious, right? It's like a virus. And I know it's probably not a great example to use.
No, I agree.
In the recent experience that we've had, but there is that sense of like, you cut me open and this is what I believe. I mean, we are who we are, and it's super, super clear. And we work through our vision and values based on who I and my partners really am.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we clarified all of that, and now when we share it with people, it just falls. I open my mouth and it just falls out. I don't have to think about it. I don't have to try real hard. I notice as I'm sharing it how excited I am about it. I'm like, oh my gosh, look at you. Your energy's going like this.
Yeah.
And I apologize to people sometimes. I'm like, man, I'm sorry you asked me a question and I threw up all over you. I said, but it's like, I have the experience of going through this with people. I have the experience of sitting down with somebody who's so confused about the complexity they've created in multiple businesses and commercial real estate and homes and accounts all over the place. I've had the experience of taking them through a process that we call clear sight discovery, where they have an aha moment, where they achieve clarity, where then they have confidence, where then they experience freedom. And when, man, that happens, it's magical. It's a hell of a lot of fun
Yeah.
to be a part of that, to experience that, to share in that with them. And then to realize that's just the initial aha moment. And as soon as we get through that, now we're digging deeper, deeper, deeper. And it's a successive experience of aha moments that leads to more clarity, more confidence, more freedom. And it just builds and grows over time. So having done this for so long and experienced that so many times, I'm just super excited about who we are and what we do. And so that's thing, go back to your question is, don't sell, be super clear about, who you are, how that translates into what you do. We say, who you help and how you help them, and then just share that with people and it'll spread like a virus. And there's that law of attraction. I don't have to, I don't ever want to feel like I'm trying to convince anybody to do anything.
Yeah.
I want to share with people who we help and how we help them. And then the people that makes sense to, great. And if it doesn't make sense to you, then that's okay too, because the worst client experiences I've ever had in my career are ones where I've convinced somebody to do business with us and then woke up later and realized like, wow, this was not a good fit. And I made a mistake of convincing you to become my client. And I should have helped you gain clarity that you're not a good fit for what we do.
It's funny you just said that. So there's the old saying is, convincing somebody is getting them to do what you want for your reasons, and persuading somebody is getting them to do the thing that's best for them and just helping them over the hurdle. I don't remember the exact quote, but at a certain point, your job becomes convincing somebody not to work with you, right? Because it's just so much more destructive, and time is so valuable, especially for folks in the stage that you work with, that, you could spend 6 months, a year, 2 years with somebody and just be not the right fit. There's all sorts of, you've gone down the path on things. So I think that's a really insightful and wise position to be taking as somebody that's out there working with these types of folks, because they're so rare. It's so counterintuitive to be like, I'm going to make it rarer still, and I'm only going to work with those folks that are clear core value fits or, mission fits or whatever. I love that, man. You mentioned virality, and then you kind of made the joke about, alluding to the pandemic. Have you found what has changed about the folks you're working with, about the business through COVID? Are folks selling at a higher rate? Are there, what have you guys seen affected by the global pandemic, and where do you see that going in the short term?
Yeah, it's interesting. As far as affecting my business, interestingly, it's been all positive.
Yeah.
And positive in big, big ways.
Mm-hmm.
The last 2 years have been our best 2 years in our history. Our average growth rate over the past 12 years has been, I think it was 12 or 13%. We just did all this back in November at our annual, and my partner created all the math. But then 2 years ago, 2020, we grew at 20%. Last year, we grew at 25%.
Wow.
So absolutely incredible. So in the midst of the global pandemic, we've had 2 of our best growth years ever. That's one thing. Number 2, as it relates to clients, and you asked about this earlier, one of our newest, bigger clients, we still have not met face-to-face yet, lives in the Southeast, was an introduction through a client here. We've done everything through Zoom, like you and I are doing this, and it's been working great. We want to go down there sometime and spend some time with these people. I think it's, the right thing to do. It is for me, especially. But wow, we can bring on a target market client and work with them for a couple of years all over Zoom. So opening it up that way. Now, when we have meetings with clients, we offer to them, do you want to do it in person or via Zoom? Sometimes we need their CPA, attorney, whatever in a meeting, we can Zoom them in. So that freedom and flexibility has been great. The other way it's impacted my team is we have 12 people. We used to all be here, almost all of us every day, blah, blah, blah. Now, we've said for the foreseeable future, we're going to stick by this. You're free to come in if you want, and you certainly don't have to. What we're interested in is your productivity. And if that stays really high and you stay home, that's great. High five, love it. And today we've got 5 people out of 12 in the office. And I would say that's pretty typical, is around 4 or 5 a day come in. And that freedom and flexibility has been a real gift to the team. And it's working great so far. So
yeah, I think you probably are alluding to something that it seems like the world just got fast forwarded maybe 3 to 5 years. I think there's going to be the Goldman Sachs and JP Morgans of the world that are going to probably always make you go to the office, at least for the foreseeable future. But it seems like we just accelerated that kind of remote, again, I'm totally agnostic to where you're doing the work. I'm much more concerned about the quality that you're putting out and speed and things like that. And frankly, you're cutting 2 hours out of most people's day. I want to go back to, I'm not surprised to hear that you guys have had great 2 years, but congratulations, that's great. And it sounds like you're helping a lot of folks. Have you gotten an impression as to, so it makes sense to me, sorry to jumble that up a little bit. I've sold, or at least partially sold, 2 businesses during this pandemic myself. And it makes sense to me that people would want to take some chips off the table. The thing that is maybe, I don't know if I would say concerning, but interesting to me to hear from you would be, are you seeing people selling to young entrepreneurs that are going to carry on that tradition? Or are you seeing people selling and consolidating into more like a corporate type world?
Yeah, great question. And I have a couple of friends who are investment bankers, and the M&A world is exploding right now. And it's really what I see is private equity, gobbling up and consolidating businesses to increase the value. So an example would be in the HVAC space. So heating, plumbing, cooling, air conditioning, that type of stuff. Those types of businesses, private equity has gone wild at gobbling those up at historically high valuations, but getting a bigger enterprise value by bringing them together, letting them keep their names, but still operating them as, one maybe regional or national conglomeration, but keep their local name and presence. So that has been crazy. And then another really interesting trend is a friend of mine is an investment banker, but he specializes in Esops. Mm-hmm. For people that don't know, ESOP is an employee stock ownership plan where you sell the company to the employees. So with record high valuations, record low interest rates, the environment that we're in has made it really, really good for ESOPs. And that's a certain type of business owner that works for. But, he's had back-to-back crazy record years in doing ESOPs. So the private equity and the ESOPs are the 2 things that I've been very familiar with through my clients and a couple of friends of mine that operate in those worlds. I'm sure there's a lot of other activity in other ways. I don't have any personal experience with somebody selling a business to another guy or younger person or something like that.
Today's show is brought to you by High Level CRM. High Level is an all-in-one platform designed to help entrepreneurs grow their businesses without the need for multiple softwares or an IT team. Not only does their easy-to-use software allow you to track and manage your leads throughout each phase of the relationship, but it also allows you to build funnels, track stats, and more. Guys, I sat down and added up the cost of software I was able to replace with just one app, and it was over $1,000 per month. Because this is an all-in-one application, I also save a ton of headaches connecting apps and building automations, and the team at Go High Level does a great job of getting you started quickly and easily when you sign on. I cannot more highly recommend these guys. Right now, Spear and Clover listeners get a free 14-day trial of High Level CRM for themselves. Click the link in our show notes to support the show and get started on your free 14-day trial today. Today's show is brought to you by Scaling with Media. I mean, literally, if it weren't for the folks at Scaling with Media, you would not be getting this. Scaling with Media is a truly revolutionary company for any entrepreneur who wants to reach a larger audience without taking on the years of experience necessary to master the required skills. These guys do it all. From helping you develop your creative plan to editing, sourcing content, copywriting, ads management, and way more. Whether you're looking to launch a YouTube channel or podcast, or you just want to scale your business out to more eyeballs, these guys are the absolute best one-stop shop. But that's not all. Right now, Spear and Clover listeners who sign up for their brand launch package will receive a free, that's right, free professional grade studio kit that I'm actually recording right now on. The studio kit includes a professional microphone, stand, lighting, and headphones, and is worth well over $500. Take action now by going to scalingwithmedia.com/spear and claim your free studio kit. Again, that's scalingwithmedia.com/spear, scalingwithmedia.com/spear. Now back to the show.
Yeah. And that's not, I don't know if it's disappointing. Maybe there's like some romantic in me that wants, some young, I sold to the GM of our business who's like a brother to me, and that was great. But I'm not surprised to hear that private equity is doing well. Basically everybody that I know that is still of working age and has made exits talks about private equity, myself included. And so when I hear that, and if you asked me when I was in Chicago, I would have said, private equity, it's, you're spreadsheet warriors. You're going to go out there and my experience with private equity was mostly theoretical. Well, I moved to Northwest Indiana, and shout out to anybody that's a friend of mine or listening to this from Northwest Indiana. I got nothing but love for you. Man, do we need private equity here, buddy, because you can't get anything done. You can't get an appointment booked. You can't get your billing taken care of. You got to have it. I had to order checks. And so the long story short is there's tons of opportunity to consolidate systems and technology and vision across these, all sorts of industries. I mean, I'm talking not just trades, but I can't get a LASIK appointment. So what I will tell you is there's just huge opportunities. A friend of mine works with dentists, and they've done very well. And not just that, you're helping more people. There is a romantic side to me that sees maybe not the best future in that, but I can definitely see the value for sure. So that's very interesting.
I think private equity's evolved a lot too.
Sure.
20 years ago, they would gobble things up, and it was all about the enterprise value, and they would change the names and all this. And I think they've matured and grown and see the world a little bit differently. Obviously, they're still in it to make a lot of money, but the actual execution of that has preserved some of the values of the local business that's rolling up into the private equity and allowed it to continue to service its customers or clientele in the way it had previously. So I think they've grown and learned. And that's
in a lot of cases, that's probably a feature too, because then you maintain that goodwill and community to whatever extent that business would have it. That's really interesting. So a lot of folks listening to this probably are not in that 3,000 number that you mentioned before. They're probably not in the percentage group that you're talking about. They may not be anywhere near a financial exit. What are some things you would tell somebody who's out there hacking away, who's doing the 7 days of 15-hour work weeks? What are some things, maybe resources, maybe tips that you would give somebody who's like, look, I can see the light at the end of the tunnel, but only through binoculars. So what can I do to prepare myself now so that when it comes time, or when my hard work does eventually pay off, that I'm ready for it?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I'll steal something you said earlier that's a really easy one for me. Is something like EOS, traction, starting early and laying that foundation, getting clarity on the vision, the values, the goals, the who you really are, because that conviction is everything about getting you to where you want to be. When you can see that clearly, then you can work those long, hard hours because you know what you're creating. And so that's really, I think, the most important thing is that clarity, which then I think that's the vision part. Then the traction is the organization of all that and bringing things together. There's some other really cool things I've heard over the years. So a guy I know wrote a book, Every Family's Business. Tom Deans, I think it is. I'd have to look it up. Every Family's Business. Anyways, I actually had him maybe 10 years ago. I had him in to speak to our clients that are entrepreneurs. And he talked about his family business story and whether or not you should sell it to family, or what you really should give your kids the gift of entrepreneurship, not the gift of your business, unless they're like super excited about, whatever business you're in. But one thing he talked about is they were building their business was they were specifically building their business to sell it. And they always had that in mind. And so one of the things they did that I thought was so cool is he surveyed, and it was like an investigative way, the businesses in his space that might acquire him someday. And they did research to find out, like, here was the example he gave, like what software they used to run their company. And they found out that the company that would be most likely to buy them used a different software than they did. And they evaluated that software and found out that they actually liked it a little bit better. So over time, they migrated to that software. Then eventually, 10 years later, when they went to sell, they had actually evolved the company to be so much like this other company that when they put it on the market, they tapped them and said, hey, you should take a look at us. And they walk in, they're like, this is exactly like us. They're like, yeah, do you want to buy us? And so they ended up selling to that company because they had positioned it so perfectly to make it so easy for them to acquire them, which obviously raised the value and all that type of stuff. So that was a really cool vision about they knew who they wanted to sell to, approximately when, and then what they needed to do over time to position themselves to make it almost impossible for that company to not only buy them, but also pay a premium because it was such an easy fit.
That's brilliant. That's brilliant. I think that's awesome. I've never heard of that book, but you better believe that's my first move after this podcast is to get it. The one I like is Built to Sell. Are you familiar with Built to Sell? I mean, that's the playbook. And for me, coming from a brick and mortar service business, it's just so aligned. And just the quick synopsis there is it's a novelized kind of parable of a guy that runs a marketing agency and he thinks his company is very valuable when in fact, it's really not. And it's just the steps of his mentor kind of guiding him through making that business much more valuable. And I had the benefit of setting up this last business, having already read that. And so we were very deliberate. That was one of that traction and one other book. I can't think of it off the top of my head, and we set up the entire business based on that. And that was a good idea to do. I'll tell you what. I asked 2 questions. I lost my train of thought for a second, so I'm going to go to these 2 questions. I asked 2 questions to everybody. Sorry about that. I was thinking about the name of the book. I asked 2 questions to everybody that comes on the show. The first question is, if you had access to unlimited financial resources, what would you do to grow your business profitably?
If I had access to unlimited financial resources, what would I do to grow my business profitably? Boy, that's interesting. So I guess I would do more of what we're planning to do, probably do it bigger. So I think 2 different sides of the coin. One would be our operations, our team. And this year we're planning on adding 1.5 people. We've got and the one person would fit into this. So 1 person to the operations team. On the investment side for us, I probably would add more people sooner, I guess. And, because I would add more people sooner because I would spend a lot of money on the marketing side with getting even more dialed in with putting who we are in front of our target market. Mm-hmm. So we have not done hardly any, I guess, traditional marketing. All of our business growth has come from me being a presence in the community. So I'm the rainmaker for the firm. I serve on a couple of nonprofit boards and involved at a country club and an athletic club. And I go, out into the community with the idea of spending time with our target market with the basic mentality of who can I help and how can I help them? And then that leads to us getting new business. We don't have a formal marketing plan that involves social media, podcasts. We'd never do a billboard, but throwing that out,
Sure.
A billboard on the main thoroughfare in my town or whatever. We don't have any of that type of stuff. So I've had this question in the back of my head, if we had an extra 50 or 100 grand to spend with a marketing agency to do a bunch of stuff like that, would it have a positive impact or not? I have no idea, but I would do a plan like that. And then maybe the things I'm involved in, maybe I would done golf trips with a small group of guys to places like Whistling Straits. Maybe we'd go to Pebble Beach or Bandon Dunes or something like that. I don't know.
That's great. Yeah. I think it's smart because you didn't say it, but there was a part of it where it's like, well, if you're already doing you sound like you guys have found this real nice harmony in where you operate. And so to hear you say, well, I'll bring on 1.5 people, maybe I bring on 2.5 people, right. That seems like, a lot of times I talk to people and it's like, well, I would do this huge change. It's like, well, you're already kind of operating in the pocket of where you belong. I think that's just really refreshing to hear. And I'm not going to spoil it, but there is an answer that I've been waiting to hear from somebody. One day somebody's going to give it to me. I'm not going to say it now. The second question I have for you is, if you had to give up this business and any that you've done in the past, and you had to start another business tomorrow or whenever, what type of business would interest you? What do you think you would enjoy doing that you've never done before?
Yeah, that's a great question. So having spent my high school and college years in the food service business and then 10 years out of college in the food service business, I wouldn't do anything in that world. We eliminate that right now.
Yeah.
Right. That's anybody who's listening to this podcast that owns restaurants or is in food service, catering, hospitality, whatever, God bless you. And I mean that sincerely. That is a hard row to hoe. And you're special people that can be successful in that world.
Sure.
And then if you have to eliminate what I do now, which I absolutely love,
sure,
I think I would go to, it's interesting, it would be something physical product wise. So there's this entrepreneurial, question in my head is like, I'm in a more of a professional services world.
Mm-hmm.
I don't manufacture a product and sell it.
Yeah.
So there's a curiousness to me because I have clients that do that. And I love going into their factories and walking down the line and like, tell me how you put this stuff together. And it's so fascinating to me about throughput and efficiencies and factories and all that kind of stuff. So there probably would be something brick and mortar factory manufacturing, and then another place of interest and curiosity for me has always been automotive. And I didn't grow up in Detroit, which is interesting. I grew up in Indiana, but I've always had a deep love of automobiles and just the way they work and operate. And I love talking about them and thinking about them. And I love people who own a lot of cars and are enthusiasts and all that kind of stuff. So it would probably be something coming together in that world. And then based on the way the world's evolving, I would assume that it'd have to be something in the EV space, right? So electrical vehicle manufacturing, I could probably pull all that together, and that would be exciting and fun and cool, I think.
Well, you and I should never go camping because we'd come back with a classic car company for sure. I literally, the two answers you just gave are the two things that I think about a lot. We have a mutual friend, Martin Rawls-Meehan, who's in a manufacturing business. We'll have him on as a guest. I'm not sure when these will come out, so soon. But, I look over the fence at that as somebody that works in service. I've been a consultant for businesses. I've been a service industry person when I did run a direct-to-client type business. And I agree. The manufacturing thing has always been very intriguing to me. I like the way things go together, the way things work. Like you said, throughput. For me, the word scale just echoes in my brain constantly when you think about, digital products or even physical products, right? Whatever they may be. And the second one being cars, man. Buddy, kindred spirits. I couldn't agree more. I just got a 69 Bronco a couple of months ago, getting in the process of restoring it now. And, it's hard for me not to find somebody locally that has the expertise and just take a lease out on a shop and start doing EV Broncos or Mustangs or Corvettes or something. So we shall see. I think that there's going to be a big boom of that though coming. That's going to be the new CBD shop in the next 10 years, probably.
That's fun.
So the other question I wanted to go back to, I'd lost my train of thought before, but the other question I want to go back to, have you done any work or do you do any work in the M&A or the sale part of this process? Or do you pick up the client after that's already all been done?
Yes to all that. So we have, a majority of our clients haven't sold their business. A handful have. So we are typically meeting somebody after they've grown their business to a point where the complexity starts to get away from them. So they started the business or they bought it when it was really small. And now they've grown it to a size where it's kind of gotten out of their brain space ability to manage and control. And they're maybe hitting 55, 60, 65 years old, and they're trying to figure out, oh my gosh, what do I do with it? So we're not investment bankers. One of my partners is a certified exit planning advisor called SEPA. And we're going to help that business owner in the context of their own personal wealth, figure out what to do with this asset that probably makes up 80% of their net worth. That's a pretty good average for an entrepreneur. What is the exit strategy for them? Is it an Esop? Is it private equity? Is it selling to a competitor? Whatever it is, like what fits them. It's not always what's going to get you the biggest amount of money, because typically the amount of money you're going to get from it, no matter what you choose, is going to make you financially independent and leave plenty of money left over for a legacy. So now let's gain clarity on what's the right thing for you to do. And how does that fit in with your core values and your vision and the legacy that you want to leave? So that's where when we intersect people before they sell, that's absolutely incredible. Now, because I have, as I've mentioned before, friends that are in private or in investment banking, I get referred people who did just sell. Now, all of a sudden, here they are with this big lump of money, and they can't figure out how to relate to that. So now we come in and say, hey, the best thing to do right now is absolutely nothing. Everybody in the world's banging on your door, trying to convince you to buy their product or invest with their scheme or whatever it is. What we want you to do is park it, pause, pull back, reflect, go through a process so you can gain clarity on how you relate to that wealth, the experience you want to have with it, and then start making decisions. And so that's really, really important, because that's a really scary experience. Like, you start a business in your garage 30 years ago, you wake up, you're 62 years old, and you sell it for $30 million. That's a client that I'm talking about right now. Actually, they sold it for 40 million. He did. And he walked away with 30, I think, after everything was done. And he didn't grow up a wealthy guy, and he's got 30 million. He doesn't know how to relate to that, what to do with it. He's got way more money than he's ever going to need. The best thing to do is nothing until you gain that clarity, until you have that confidence, until you're free to make the decisions that are in alignment with what you value. They're going to help you create the vision you want to create, leave the legacy you want to leave.
I think that's brilliant. So the next question I had, you mentioned EO. The reason that you and I were connected was because you're involved with EO, which is Entrepreneur's organization. I'd love to hear more about that. I'm somebody who is a connector and loves to stay in touch with folks. And an organization like EO just seems like I'm not involved yet. I'm in the process now. Can you tell us a little bit about what that has meant for you, and for folks listening, what it can mean for them?
For sure. Yeah, EO, you mentioned Entrepreneurs, our organization. It's a global nonprofit organization with over 15,000 members worldwide. In the United States, there's basically a chapter in every major city. And you could almost say the same thing globally. And it is, I guess, the vision or the purpose, the why does EO exist, would be to help entrepreneurs become the best versions of themselves they were created to be. And so that's why I'm attracted to it. Other visionary entrepreneurs coming together, sleeves rolled up, wanting to help each other, wanting to learn and grow together. One thing I would tell you, it's not a quote unquote networking organization where you're going there to sell your products or get new clients. It's actually forbidden that you would ever peddle your products or try and make somebody, a customer or whatever. So it helps provide a safe space for people. And then there's, on a more even specific level, and there's three things that an EO does really well. Number one is learning events. So probably once a quarter here at EO Detroit, we have a big learning event with some, nationally renowned speaker, author, whatever. And we get anywhere from probably 50 to 150 people, members, and you can bring guests if you want that are prospective members, sometimes spouses or business partners, whatever. But the learning events are typically really, really good. Great experience for expanding your mind in all kinds of different areas. And then number two are social events. So we do one big social event each year called our holiday party, which is coming up January 29th. We do a summer social event. And in between that, we do all kinds of different stuff with, maybe it's like pheasant hunting or golf or cigars or whatever, bourbon tasting, all kinds of stuff. So the learning, the social, and then the real meat of EO, where people rave about true transformation, happens in the context of something we call forum. And forum is within the chapter a small group of entrepreneurs that you meet with monthly for half a day that becomes like a board of advisors for your life and for your business, where you're really unpacking issues and opportunities and using the collective wisdom of that 5 to 10 people to help you take advantage of those opportunities and solve those issues. And there's a whole format for that to make sure that it's done really, really well. And it's a very effective use of your time. And so between the learning and the social, and especially the forum, people that join EO and put a lot into it get a way, way big return on it. They get so much out of it. And you'll find out there, we said earlier, evangelists, and you run into people that have put a lot into EO, and man, they're evangelists for EO because they've gotten so much more out of it than they put into it.
Yeah, I mean, you didn't say the word mastermind, but when you talk about forum, for me, that has in my life meant masterminds, right? It's meant groups of people that have faced similar issues or have unique experiences, whether they're from the same industry or not. And I couldn't tell you anything in the world that I'm more passionate about. I mean, I've been fortunate enough to be a part of entrepreneurial masterminds. I've been fortunate enough to own my own masterminds, and I may again in the future. I'm still thinking about it. I cannot more highly recommend if it's EO or if it's an organization that you identify with, working with other entrepreneurs. I'm a member of a couple of different groups now, and one in particular is very much like a board of directors for me personally and professionally. Could not more highly recommend it. We'll also put a link not only to your stuff, but also to the EO stuff as well. I could not be more aligned with the mission of what you guys are doing. And I look forward to becoming a part of probably the Chicago chapter. Great. So as we kind of wind down, Joe, I really do appreciate your time. Is there anything, again, like there's going to be somebody that's, your core demographic fit. And I certainly hope so. And certainly they would be clearly helped by reaching out to you. But for anybody else, is there any last kind of words of wisdom or things you can impart to folks that are looking to one day make an exit, or anything that you can maybe pass on before we kind of wrap up?
I don't know if I have anything specific answer to that question. I might zoom out a little bit from that and think just about life in general. I can't remember if we discussed this at all when we talked on the phone, but I had an experience over the summer, just this past summer, where I got COVID and was one of those people who ended up in the hospital and almost lost my life to it. I had a pretty low percentage chance of living when I went into the hospital, a very low oxygen saturation. I ended up in the hospital for 23 days.
Wow.
And was, even when I went home after 23 days, was 4 more weeks at home, still on oxygen supplementation that I needed for most of that time to walk from one room to another in my house. It wasn't until September 20th of last year. I went in the hospital July 12th, got out in August, and then didn't leave the house until September 20th. I had a lot of time to think and pause and reflect. And for a very driven, super active entrepreneurial guy like me, man, that was tough. But it did provide me a lot of opportunity to pause and reflect and have that realization of how much busyness was an identity for me, and how much I was filling my life and my time with a lot of stuff that didn't really need to get done, because I was off completely out for almost 3 months. I think by the time I was really fully back engaged, it was almost 3 months of being out of work and out of doing anything personally in my family of 8. And everything went on without, it was maybe a little more work for some people, my wife especially, but all of the things that I was filling my life with and doing that I thought were so important, I realized that not all of them were that important. And so I really, since then, have been focusing on what are the most essential things? What are the most important things? What are the things that really, truly matter? And how do I give myself fully to those things first? And then if there's time left over for other things, whatever, great. Netflix show that somebody recommended. Am I going to watch that? Man, if everything else that matters a ton is taken care of and I still have time left over, I'm good. I'm in for a good comedy or sci-fi show or whatever, I might do that. But I have such a high level of conviction about giving myself so fully to the things that matter the most, coming out of that incredible, difficult experience, that now I look back and I'm like, yeah, man, that was really, really challenging. And I lost out on a lot of stuff that I didn't participate in that I'll never be able to get back. But what I learned in having almost 3 months to reflect, and having such a long period of time where I was incapable of doing almost anything, was really, really incredible. So that's what I would share.
Wow. Thank you so much for sharing. That was really powerful. And I think if there's anything that you can say to that is that you can hope through a story like that or through many stories like that, recently in particular, that you try to learn that lesson if you can from hearing it as opposed to having to live through it. But I really do appreciate that's powerful stuff, man. And, with that said, Joe, where can folks find you? What's a good way to get a hold of you? And we'll also put, of course, the links in the notes below.
Yeah, absolutely. So our website, mkdwealthcoaches.com, is great. I'm on LinkedIn and I think I'm on Twitter, but hey, you can always reach out. My cell phone number, 248-207-9735. If you like what you heard, you want to chat, you need help with aha moments, gaining clarity. It's one of my personal core values is living in the question, searching for the deeper truth. If you need help with that, I'm your guy.
Joe, thanks again. I really appreciate you coming on. Ladies and gentlemen, Spear and Clover Podcast, your host, Jason Skisick. Have a great day.
Thank you guys so much for watching or listening to the show. If you enjoyed the show, please don't forget to show us some love by liking, rating, and subscribing so we can keep making more and better content. If you'd like to support the show and get a great additional content like exclusive shows and even live group masterminds, please head over to patreon.com/Spear and Clover to become a member of the tribe. If you're interested in learning more about how we help entrepreneurs, visit spearandclover.com or message us on any of our platforms. Thanks again, and we'll see you soon.